Hello and welcome to Somatic Self Care. I'm Lizzie Lasater, and joining us today is the wonderful, unprecedented, unparalleled Mary Richards. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Lizzie.
We have taken a few weeks pause for Mary to finish and turn in her manuscript of her first book. Congratulations, Mary.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
What can you tell us? Tell us one thing about the book before we get started.
One thing, it's what I hope will prove to be a very friendly and practical roadmap to satisfying, individualized practice.
Mm. All right. Well, and I've perused the manuscript, and I can tell you all that it's such a wonderful read. So I'm looking forward to getting a hard copy in my hands. Do you have a rough publishing date yet?
April
Okay.
2023. I'm in design right now,
Okay.
which is super exciting.
Well, we're looking forward to that. Today, we are focusing on chapter 16 from The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. As you know, we've been moving through this book sort of chapter by chapter, talking about the material and then interspersing those with interludes where Mary has offered us some physical practices. So this is the last chapter that we're doing in this manner. This is the chapter about yoga. Mary, where do you want to start with this chapter? I mean, this just seems like absolutely our wheelhouse, but what's so interesting is his expertise is about trauma and the connection that he makes between the practices of yoga and how they can support our trauma recovery. What strikes you about this chapter?
Well, that the title of the chapter itself, Learning to Inhabit Your Body, yoga, kind of says it all.
Yeah.
Yoga is a comprehensive system for self-knowing, and its tools and strategies, its practices and philosophies, in our parlance, I believe are perfectly engineered to help us come home to ourselves, to return home if we need that, to regain that, to stay home and to enjoy being there.
Yeah, it strikes me as well in reading this chapter and reflecting on my own experience of the practice that yoga is such a accessible form of embodiment.
Oh, yes.
And for me, like I've been playing with the sort of mantra recently that yoga is a breath practice. So
Mhm.
using the breath as my way in and like loosening my grip on the physicality of it. Of course, I'm
Mhm.
moving my body in space, but thinking less about the shapes that I'm making and more about bringing my breath into the foreground.
Interesting. And have you noticed a change in your feelings during your asana practice?
I feel lighter
Mhm.
and I feel less ambitious, less striving.
Mhm. Mhm. I really like hearing you talk about your experience, Lizzie, because I've been a practitioner for over 30 years now, and it took me a long time to learn that lesson. To slow down and to really saturate myself with my sensory experiences, because when I first came to the mat, I was young. I was 21 years old and an NCAA athlete, and I had a very high pressure job. I was working in nuclear non-proliferation, uh, and it's I used the asana really to punish my body. to force my body to do what I thought it wasn't doing, what it should be doing. So it took me personally a long time to reframe my relationship with asana and recognize that each asana was actually a container for me, to hold myself and explore my space within that context of the vessel, both my body and the sacred geometry of the asana itself. And when I began unwinding myself from the belief that I was doing asana to fix myself, to make myself better in some way, and I began to approach my practice with a sense of softness and curiosity. When curiosity became my guiding value on the mat, I really began to befriend myself in a profoundly deep way that I really attribute to keeping me looking down at the dirt. I mean, because like, especially, I'm sure lots of folks have this experience. And, I was a very successful student. I had a lot of stress and anxiety in my home life. And so school was always a refuge for me. And so I worked really hard at school because it validated me. And through that validation, which was so necessary to me as a young person, it really centered my intellectual prowess and cognitive prowess. And so I disassociated, really. I thought my body was something that needed to be overcome, to be reined in, to be shaped, manipulated, made to look and behave a certain way. And it was a really, to borrow Angela Farmer's words to me, bankrupt way to practice. Because I was striving for my idea of perfection, which, your mom talks about perfection a lot as being brittle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was brittle because, see, I could never get to perfect. And if I had a perfect asana, whatever that is, it was over. So you can't hang on to it. And so once I began to shift toward, whoa, I'm actually feeling tension in my belly. I'm feeling tension between my shoulder blades that's not related to muscle fatigue or weakness or improper glenohumeral congruence. It wasn't anything like that. It was very much that I was learning to feel myself again. And that's the thing. That's what yoga really allows us to do.
I want to read here a quote from Bessel van der Kolk in the section of chapter 16 called The Numbing Within. He writes, "The lives of many trauma survivors come to revolve around bracing against and neutralizing unwanted sensory experiences. And most people I see in my practice have become experts in such self-numbing. They may become serially obese or anorexic or addicted to exercise or work. At least half of all traumatized people try to dull their intolerable inner world with drugs or alcohol. The flip side of numbing is sensation seeking."
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us a little bit about yoga as a practice for sensation seeking.
Sure. So let's back up just a couple of steps, Lizzie, if we can, and just do a quick review of the neurobiology that leads to the numbing. Are you cool with that?
Please.
Okay. So for folks that have experienced trauma, their nervous system has been rewired. The amygdala, the limbic system, the amygdala is malfunctioning. It's on a state of high alert. We And because our smoke detector, to use Bessel van der Kolk's term, the smoke detector of known as the amygdala is malfunctioning, we can't trust our own perception. Okay. And so because we can't trust our own perception, we're disconnected from ourselves. And when we're disconnected from ourselves, there's no way we can help ourselves. And of course, the reason why we get discombobulated in our nervous system is because the strategies that were available to us when the trauma was occurring, they failed to change the trauma, or they were the best we had, and we simply had to get through it. And so what yoga does is it teaches us, it creates opportunities where we learn to feel safe in our own bodies. And the mechanism that it uses that is intimately tied to not only the limbic system and its function as an alarm system, a watchtower for regulation, but it also is tied to the most basic elemental systems of life in the body, specifically our breath. And so when we attune our attention to our breath, we're actually connecting we're plugging ourselves into the deep, deep, primal, archetypal, neurobiological systems of our existence. Is this making sense?
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's such an interesting, I didn't realize the connection between the amygdala and the breath.
Yeah, so, well, it makes sense, right? Okay, so when we are agitated, we're running on adrenaline and heart rate increases. When we are feeling calm and centered and grounded, we tend to run more on acetylcholine, and we have more relaxed respiratory rate and heart rate. Remember, we were talking several chapters ago about heart rate variability?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's, that's such an important metric of well-being. Do you remember what heart rate variability is?
I do. And I wanted to just pull this quote from chapter 16, which I thought was an elegant definition. He writes, heart rate variability measures the relative balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems.
Yes, 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 yes. So heart rate variability measures, the interval between, it measures intervals and fluctuations in heart rate between inhalation and exhalation. And what we're looking for when we're looking at a heart rhythm is we're looking for a steady, gently fluctuating rhythm. So you inhale, your heart rate increases, you exhale, your heart rate decreases. For someone that's upregulated, that's had trauma, they don't have that typical balanced, gentle fluctuation in their heart rate. The heart rate variability tends to be low, it's flat. And see, this is so intimately tied, right? So if the limbic system is governing, it's a smoke detector, and it's in charge of mobilizing the nervous system to respond to stimuli, especially to what it perceives as threat, then we're going to stay flat. We're going to stay in a state of sympathetic nervous system dominance. And really, when we're well regulated and we feel safe, the scale actually tips a bit toward parasympathetic nervous system dominance. But that gets out of kilter when trauma has rewired our limbic system in such a way that we are in a state of hypervigilance, intention, and what happens is that manifests in the body. And so what yoga does, especially because we have such a focus on the breath as a body sense, it allows us to actually get into our energetic grid, to step into the limbic system in a very gentle way. As long as we go slowly, this is key when we're relying on yoga practices to become more familiar with trauma and how it lives in us. It's very important that we go slowly because, see, the limbic system's already in a state of disarray and malfunction, so we don't want to shock the system, right?
Yeah.
We want to take our time and use our breath, because it's the breath. If we hearken back to yoga philosophy and the Chandogya Upanishad, it's the breath that is our supreme sense. It never lies. And so when we pay attention to, am I holding my breath? Am I only sipping my breath? Am I forcing myself to inhale or forcing myself to exhale? It really centers us here and now in the present moment. And by centering ourselves in the time of now, that helps us come home to ourselves, because a lot of trauma is past and future oriented, and it discombobulates our sense of time, because we may have a belief that things are always going to suck. Things are always going to be terrifying. Things are always going to be dangerous. And what breath as a body sense teaches us is that change is the reality. Fluctuation is our reality. And we can learn to dance with change, to flow with change, as long as we proceed slowly and gently with ourselves.
That's so beautifully put. Do you think, Mary, that yoga works even if the teacher and the student don't know any of what you've just explained? They don't know that this process is going on? How much cognition do we need for this practice to work?
Oh, I really enjoy this question, Lizzie. I think that trying to figure out how deep a hole I want to dig for us.
Do it.
Okay. I think that certainly there will be physiologic benefits. Okay. I believe that there will be a systemic reduction in inflammation throughout the body. There will be feelings of contentment and perhaps joy and integration. If you're, just going to class to get your vinyasa on, right? If you're just going to yoga because you enjoy it, but you're not interested in the philosophy, you're not trying to do anything with it, you're just like, I dig this yoga stuff and I want to do downward facing dog. I think you're definitely going to get some passive benefits. But I do believe that those benefits are going to be very limited unless you're engaging with the practice with intention, with education, with focus and intensity. Because in order to really affect change for ourselves, we have to know ourselves, and knowing ourselves necessitates approaching ourselves with curiosity and kindness and investigating. And that requires study, because we don't know everything. Not that that's even possible, but we don't know ourselves that well. And so this is where the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, for instance, are so useful. You can spend your life just studying one sutra. Sthira Sukhamasanam can be a lifetime of study. So I just think that if you're going to practice yoga, especially if you're going to get on the mat to work with your trauma, I really want to encourage you to devote yourself to the practice, to study, to seek out teachers that resonate with you, to challenge yourself on the mat, to learn about the neurobiology, to learn about what's happening with the body, to know your bony landmarks, to understand core stabilization. Because the more information that you have feeding your practice, the more understanding is available to you. Because I'm sorry, I don't believe ignorance is bliss. And I don't think we get to say, oh, well, I just didn't know that. Okay, that's cool. I don't know anything, and the more I learn, the less I know. But the thing is, when you don't know about something, learn about it, right? Because otherwise, in a way, it's not that you're wasting your time, but you're certainly not using your time well. If
Well, one way I would say it is that in the transnational, transcultural migration of the system of yoga coming into our lives, I began my study of yoga in California, very far from its origin story. So in that migration, I would say what became foreground were the more visible aspects, the more physical aspects. And we sort of pasted onto them our interest in health and fitness. And the more subtle aspects of breath and svadhyaya, self-study, meditation, those parts were, it's almost like they got a little bit left behind when the plant got repotted. It's like some of that soil got left behind.
There was definitely root damage, right?
Root damage. So, and what it makes me think of what you were just saying about the importance of study is that sutra from Patanjali, Tada Drushtahu Svarupe Vashtanam. And then the seer abides in her own true nature. And that is a powerful sutra for me these days, of not looking to change myself with my practice, fix myself better. It's sort of this funny dichotomy, because of course I get on my yoga mat because I think it's good for me, but it's steeping myself in knowing that I am Tattvamasi. I am already that. I don't need to change myself to be better. This right here is enough. This breath, this dog pose. I was teaching yesterday a workshop in Munich, and I said, it was a restorative workshop, 2.5 hours, but we moved maybe 15 minutes at the beginning, just really slow flow. And I was saying, like, when they were in Prasarita Paritanasan, like, I only want you to be 60% of your capacity here. Like, it's not, you don't need to do more, stretch more, be more, get more, become more. It's like 60% is great. Like, for right now, for what we're doing, is if you're with your breath, like where is our focus in the practice?
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, like, I can only speak, of course, to my experiences in the United States. where I've seen a lot of the conflation of asana with exercise, yoga for working out. You see things like core power yoga. What is that? I don't even know what that is. It misses the point. If we're just practicing asana, we're missing the point. Truly.
Right. I love that. I want to turn back a little bit to some of the science in this chapter from The Body Keeps the Score. Scientific methods have confirmed that changing the way one breathes can improve problems with anger, depression, anxiety, and that yoga can positively affect such wide-ranging medical problems as high blood pressure, elevated stress hormone secretion, asthma, and low back pain, and heart rate variability.
Mm-hmm.
So I love seeing this kind of list of benefits of yoga. How does that inform your practice? Kind of knowing this science behind.
Okay. Can I tell a story really quickly?
Please.
Okay. Because this is relevant. Okay. So we know I'm a nerd. In case you're wondering, Mary Richards is a nerd.
Yes.
And so I take tons of continuing education, and I do this actually, I take neurobiology courses taught by neurologists and all sorts of stuff. I'm a lifelong learner. I love it more than anything. And the more science fluency I gain, the more able I am to tailor my practice specifically to my needs. And I have some exceptional wellness challenges. I had a homicidal uterus surgically evicted a couple years ago. And I have a bionic hip, titanium hip. I have cloned cartilage and pins in my knee. So I have all this stuff, but most importantly, I have a really severe arrhythmia, cardiac arrhythmia, and I have a microaneurysm formation in my right ventricular wall. So my heart could blow, So I'm so fascinated with polyvagal theory and heart rate variability and things like that, and how yoga can help me improve my heart rate variability because I have an arrhythmia. Okay, so the reason why I have an arrhythmia is because my uterus tried to kill me, and in 2019 I lost 37% of my blood supply. Don't try that at home, my friends. And it damaged my heart. And so I have to go to see a regular cardiologist and then what I call a heart electrician, a cardiac electrophysiologist. I was going every 4 to 6 months. Then they moved me to every 6 to 9 months. And I just went on August 24th to see my cardiologist after I had seen my heart electrician a couple weeks before. And for the first time in 3 years, I had a steady rhythmic heart rate at 59 beats per minute.
Wow.
Now, I was running 42 beats per minute and 55% of my beats were PVCs. This was a very bad situation. Now my PVCs are down to less than a third of my beats, and I'm at 59 beats per minute. Like crazy, right? And so I'm talking to my cardiologist, whom I adore, and he's like, what are you doing? Because this isn't explained by the medication, because you're on a very low dose of the medication. That's a whole thing I won't bother you all with, that whole discussion. And I told him, I said, well, I've been doing I didn't use pranayama because he's not a yoga person. I said, I've been doing lots of breathing exercises, and specifically, I've been doing a breath pattern that was studied by the National Health System in the UK, where I inhale for 7, retain for 4, exhale for a count of 11, 7, 4, 11. And I do that 3 times a day for 5 minutes. And then twice a day, I do even inhalation, even exhalation, Samavriti. Inhale, I need to inhale 7, exhale 7. A lot of people do 5 and 5. That's cool. You know, it's got to work for you. So I do Samavriti, and then I do, you know, this 7, 4, 11. And he looked at me and he said, you know, we're doing studies on this. And we now know that exactly the type of exercises you're doing indicate improvements in HRV. I can't say they produce them because I don't have the data to back up that statement yet, but I'm telling you, keep doing it. So this is just my own anecdotal experience with pranayama, but this is something that after I got out of the medical crisis of 2019, and it truly was a crisis, I definitely confronted my mortality in 2019. And in 2 years, basically, through diligent, educated, data-informed, tradition-based pranayama practice, I have reestablished my heart rate variability.
Wow, that is an amazing story, Mary.
Yeah. And it's so exciting because it means, you know, folks are stuck with me for a bit longer. But what's most important to me is that it's something that I did for myself, and it didn't cost me anything except for time and attention.
Is heart rate variability something that we can measure at home? Like, I can't even remember it ever being measured, mine ever being measured at a doctor's office. Is it something that like an Apple Watch is measuring?
Oh gosh, I love this. Okay, so HRV is a relatively new biometric biomarker. It's relatively new, not meaning that HRV was just recently discovered, and it was really because of the research of Stephen Porges that we learned about heart rate variability as he was investigating polyvagal theory. And then HRV began to proliferate into certain specializations like psychoneuroimmunology and neurobiology. And it was Bessel van der Kolk and one of his partners, whose name escapes me at the moment, when they learned of this biomarker HRV, they began to measure it in their behavioral health studies and their trauma studies, right? So there are devices that measure HRV, but they're expensive. But now with the new Apple Watches, it has to be a certain generation of an Apple Watch. They're now outfitted with ECGs and things like that can give you an idea of your rhythm. In fact, my cardiologist said to me, you should get a new Apple Watch because you can get an electrocardiogram on it.
Wow.
So, but I'll tell you one way that you can do this for yourself, which is kind of old school yogi way, is really when you're practicing pranayama. And it's particularly nice to do this if you're in your favorite restorative pose, whatever that is. You want to be in a position that you just love, love, love to be in, that's optimally comfortable for you in the moment. And just as you're engaging with your pranayama, maybe let go of the counting a little bit. Instead, direct your attention like a laser into the heart sensations when you inhale and exhale. You will notice a difference. You will feel the little squeeze. That's not the little contraction. You'll feel the little contractile energy in your heart when you inhale, and you'll feel your heart soften when you exhale.
Okay. I will I will try that.
I mean, some people will get like so the way an Hrv monitor works, and I've been hooked up to them a ton because, I'm a cardiologist, I'm a frequent flyer in a cardiologist's office. It's like a pre-core chest strap fitness monitor. So you don't measure HRV necessarily at your radial pulse or your carotids, because HRV is really a measurement, of the relationship, the dynamic relationship between breath and heart. It's a chest strap setup.
So I just want to say thank you to you for this series of conversations. It's been such a pleasure to learn with you and to draft off your enthusiasm for these topics. I have to say, specifically, heart rate variability was a new concept that you really highlighted, and interoception. I've been fascinated by that word and that idea since reading this book and since speaking with you. Anything you want to say about chapter 16 or about this book before I ask my final question, Mary?
Yes. Okay. So what I want to say, I want to highlight that just doing yoga practice, right? Just stepping on the mat casually, that alone may lead to improvements in our basic self-regulatory systems, okay? But the data is there. The data is there, friends, that by undertaking a slow, gentle, breath and sensation focused mat practice of asana, active asana, breathing, pranayama, and restorative yoga. That is one of the most potent gifts you can give yourself, because wiring into ourselves is truly where we find our liberty and autonomy and freedom. The fundamental truth of our embodied existence is if we're not aware of our body's needs, we can't take care of ourselves. And sensory awareness is key to living life in a way that leads to well-being and feelings of safety and agency. So get on the mat. Get on the mat.
Get on the mat. That is such a perfect segue to this last quote I wanted to read from the chapter. It's actually, it's in The Body Keeps the Score, but he's quoting Stephen Cope from Yoga and the Quest for the True Self. As we begin to re-experience a visceral reconnection with the needs of our bodies, there is a brand new capacity to warmly love the self. We experience a new quality of authenticity in our caring, which redirects our attention to our health, our diets, our energy, our time management. This enhanced care for the self arises spontaneously and naturally, not as a response to a, quote, should. We are able to experience an immediate and intrinsic pleasure in self-care. That has certainly been my experience. So my final question for you, Mary, on the Somatic Self Care podcast, we've talked a lot about yoga today. What comes to your mind, just as an idea or two? What are your favorite ways to take pleasure in self-care?
Oh, I love asana so much. Like, I get on my mat because I enjoy feeling my body. And I live with a lot of chronic pain, right? And see, chronic pain can be the loudest voice in the body. And this is why I love asana so much, is because it it constantly invites me to listen to all of the voices alive in my sensory grid. I get to hear from ease and joy and pleasure and tension and lightness and warmth and coolness. I get to hear from all of those sensations. And so I just really, really love it. And my favorite thing I think about somatic practices is they remind me of my inherent right to be who I am, that there's nothing wrong with me, and that everything I'm experiencing right here, right now is okay. And at a minimum, if it's not okay, it's going to change. And I even have within me the capacities, the tolerances, the creativity to invite change that I enjoy. I like how somatics give me choice. They remind me of that. They remind me of my autonomy and independence.
I just jumped up to shh Nico because there was some loud rumblings. I love that, Mary, the dignity. That's the word that comes to mind as you were speaking, the ways in which these practices spark dignity, a sense of dignity in the body and worthiness. I love this idea that Mom likes to say as well, that Shavasana is a gift we give to ourselves and the world at the same time. And I think all of our practices of yoga and somatic self-care, what we're doing to regulate our own nervous systems is not selfish. It's absolutely helping, because we live in a network. It absolutely helps to regulate the nervous systems of the people that we live with, and really everyone we come into contact with throughout our day.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't be with you any closer, because I really believe that the less reactive I am, the more responsive I become, the more autonomous I become, meaning I'm not living in my limbic system. I have more space between my prefrontal and medium prefrontal cortices, between my amygdala, that gives me more opportunity, and it allows me to show up in a way that I enjoy showing up and meeting people. And the more I center, my own dignity within myself, the more competent I am at doing that for other people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mary. I think we'll leave it there for today. I just want to remind everyone that this Somatic Self-Care podcast is our offering of an optimistic, enthusiastic cheerleading for simple ways that you can take better care of your sweet self. And we believe in you. Mary, tell us where we can find you on the internet.
You can find me at Yoga with Mary Richards across the board.
All right. And I'm Lizzie, LIZZIE.yoga. That's my website. You can link through to everything from there. Big namaste, Mary.
Right back at you, Lizzie.